A little different.
It fits. Hello and welcome to Gierok Farms. As you guys may have noticed from this first clip here, Dad bought a new saw, so we're gonna let him give his first impressions and talk about why he purchased the new saw, what size it is, and what he thinks, you know, upgrading to a new saw versus running the older saws. From what I'm seeing, this looks like kind of the mid-range for size, but I'm sure he'll go into more detail about that and why he decided to upgrade and get another saw.
Well, I got another saw because I just wanted it. Isn't that what you do when you get older? This is the 500, and I think maybe 2-3 years they've been out already, but you can't get them. They're always sold out. The dealer, they'll give them like 4 or 5 and he sells them within a few days. There's like a waiting list. But they're supposed to have like some, I don't know, some kind of electronic ignition, and there's no choke in it. Basically just a stop button. Just grab the saw and pull the thing, and from what I heard, and I just even hear, this first time I actually ran it, it doesn't require really any warm up like some saws will run kind of rough when they're warming up, especially the old one. And then it's got the light bar on it, which is kind of, they've been really pushing that lately, and really all it is the center of that bar is, I think right in here they must have something different in there that's lighter. Otherwise, I think the tip and then the rail and everything, that's all the same. But you can tell it's lighter. So that saw is equivalent to my 38 Magnum, which I bought in '93, cc's or horsepower, which is kind of interesting how a 38, and Stihl's been pretty consistent with their numbers. It takes a 500 today to match a 38.
Do you know offhand what the cc's would be on this?
I didn't even look in the book. We probably should look that up. You could probably just
I can insert
pop
that
it up there. I think what the real thing is, it's lighter, and this is the first one of this type. They claim that'll outdo my 660, and I can already tell there's way more speed in the chain. So we'll see how that goes. And typically, when there's more speed, makes more heat. Will it dull faster? You know, like the really old saws, the chain used to run a lot slower, but they had so much torque, it could bog down, kind of like those old tractors. As far as I'm concerned right now, my 38 Magnum still is the saw. So this saw's got to prove itself in time, not just performance now, because that's really a big deal too. But I don't know, some of my main wood cutting saws, it's like my 38 so wore out. This 066, not too far behind it, we bought that used. I would prefer to buy good used old saws, but there is none. When they get one, some old timer brings one in because he says, hey, it's too heavy, he wants the new lighter saw, he's not cutting wood anymore much. They pretty much sell the same day to somebody else.
Yeah, I know a lot of auctions, and especially if it's a mid-size saw or like a 66 or something, they're gone right away.
If they're good shape, not all busted up, but sometimes, like I got a 38 Magnum for parts. I found it at the dealership too. And it didn't run all that well. I went out and cut some stuff with it, but then it ended up my good 38, my original 38 needed some, I don't know what was broke on it, but pretty soon I'm swapping off parts to the point where, and it paid for itself several times over because of that. If you can find anything with the old first, as far as the Stihl's concerned, those are the good old faithfuls. But again, if they were taken care of, if they were ran on the right mixture of fuel, you know, some of these guys, you know, they didn't take care of them right or run them right, so then you don't know. But
now I know this is going to be a question, since you're talking about the saws you would prefer to buy. Someone's going to ask, in your opinion, for the guy that's just getting into chainsaws and needs a good all-around saw, what would you recommend buying? If he can find an older 38, go that route, or would you recommend going?
Well, if you can find a good 38 Magnum, but another thing is how experienced you are with a chainsaw. So if you're kind of say, oh, okay, we're going to make firewood, we're going to heat our house just when it's really cold. We're not going to get real serious, but we still want a good wood cutting saw. You know, like I got this 360, you know, the 30. You don't need these really big saws. Heck, this 250 is really, you know, for somebody starting out, I think that's a nice mid-size. And then there's numbers in the threes. You know, I don't know all the new numbers now. I have to get the book. The reason I got a lot of small saws is because of carving. When I go to shows, I'll have like 4 or 5 sharpened up and fueled up, and yeah, you get there and the string will pop out, or one will get dull because you hit maybe the gravel or something with it when you were. So then you don't have to stop. It's really what it is.
And you've touched on this in prior videos. When it comes to the colors of the handles, what do they mean again? It's commercial versus residential, and you know, as someone going to buy a saw, what does that handle color mean?
So if you just come across one in a garage sale or auction or something, typically with STIHL, that the white handle is more considered a professional saw. See, like this is a tree trimmer saw. That's my smallest one, but it's still got the white handle. You know, these two, these are like $600 and some saws. That was 10 years ago already. And the piston actually runs the other way. And they sell this in a top handle too. So that's your tree trimmers. So really what it is, your arms are further apart. You got nice control there. But yeah, then you get down to like the 180s, you see the handles are red. And then, or the 250s and the 180s are black. So that's a step below that, you know, the 180s. You know, and then here my 88, you know, you got the white handle again.
So what we're trying to say here is when you're going to buy a saw, it doesn't really matter what size it is necessarily, more or less.
How they're built.
Yeah.
They'll put a little more something in them, because if you're just going to be the backyard, you know, trim up the limb that fell down, or
yeah. So if you only run a saw for maybe 2 hours out of the year, you'd be buying a black handled saw.
Well, and the only neat thing about buying a little more industrial built saw is that they hold value better. You know, it's like everything in this world. You know, you can get off-brand stuff that's a little cheaper, and maybe it's fine if you're not gonna get all worried about that. But that's the neat thing about all these saws would bring. I would almost like to think some of these really old, bigger ones would be worth what they were new, as long as they're cleaned up good and you got a sharp chain on them.
I bet with inflation they probably are.
Yeah, it's like our tractors and anything, and that's the one thing with the industrial type stuff. It pretty much holds value. You get your off brands, you know, whether you bought stuff like at the box stores, Menards, or wherever like that.
Back to this new 500, when you were going to purchase it, did they have different bar lengths from the factory, or was this just?
Well, this is what they had on it. That's a 25-inch, and that's what I got on my 660 and my 066. Well, no, my 066 has actually got a 20-inch. Most of my stock bars are 20-inch. Which I stuck with 20-inch because then all the chains mix and match. Let's say this saw, you know, I had the string and it pulled out well, and then this one I'm using, and then the chain gets dull, and I can just take the chain off of this one, stick it on this one when I'm out away from the shop or whatever. So everything mixes and matches nice. You know, considering what the power is in that thing, you'd probably be 20-inch would be sufficient. You're going to cut some pretty big stuff down with 20-inch already. The thing is, the longer the bar gets, the harder it is to control it. You know, I noticed like on the 880, I've got a 46, I don't know. It's under 5 feet, but it's a long one. And it's for that, making that one big cut when I'm doing some kind of carving thing. But I noticed that the bar is doing the old, you know, it's bouncing around. It's hard to control it. So sometimes that long bar, you think, oh, you're going to really cut some stuff down. You know, it's kind of like having bigger wheels on your tractor versus smaller wheels. You're going to need more power to make that whole thing move. Not always necessary.
Back to this newer saw, so they claim that it would put out just as much power as a step up on size compared to the older saws. So 066, they claim that this is going to...
Well, that's what the book specifications tell me. It's going to be a whole different story when you take it out to the woods. What I've noticed, so I had my 38 Magnum. I bought this 360, which is, it's quite a step down from it, but body-wise they're about the same. And they both had 20-inch bars on. Then I went up to the 660, and this thing didn't have a lot more speed than these two. But it didn't seem to have the torque. So when you really started bogging down, you had to kind of back off and let that it's almost like you had to let the saw catch up. Where these saws is kind of like more like them old tractors. They just walk down and you never really stopped. I would have to say I could have cut just as faster with the smaller saw. So it's the way they're built. And then a lot of times it's the emission laws today. Everything is so fine with emissions that it's hard to get that power out of them that way. But a lot more speed, and I think for like carving or certain things it might be better. It's going to give me a smoother cut, that's for sure.
I'm excited to get your opinion over time when it comes to how much lighter this new saw is.
Yeah, I can feel it lighter.
Versus like a 66.
Yeah. And that's maybe, I guess, if you're going to be in the woods falling trees all day long and that's your career, that's going to make a huge difference. But if you just want to get that thing out and you got your stuff all laying out on your landing or whatever, where you're just blocking stuff up, because then you just lay your saw on it, you're not holding that saw. When you got to put it in the side of a tree, you got to balance that saw just right. And you almost have to put the pressure towards it. You can't let the weight of the saw do the work for you like that. So really when it comes down to it, I think the bigger saws are safer when they're heavy. You kind of lock them in there, and if they start to buck on you, you got a lot more weight. That's the one thing, a lot of power and a light saw, you know, pretty soon you kind of take it for granted and it starts to get away on you. You know, then you physically got to hold it down. The weight ain't going to help you. So we'll see how it all works out. I mean, it's just like everything. There's a new, that really is something. I don't know what Husqvarna's doing yet. Maybe they've got some saws that are doing the same thing now. But this ignition they got on here is, I think, kind of a hot thing today. And what tells me the story is you get the guys that are in the logging business and they're hunting for these. They know. You know, they run them all day. They know.
I noticed firsthand here they kept the same fuel caps. You got any info on that?
Well, the fuel cap, I kind of like the old style stuff, but the first thing I noticed right away when the dealer was fueling it up is our oil cap and our fuel cap are the same size. The container's smaller, which is kind of all right. I mean, it's tough enough trying to direct it, whatever your oil or gas into that small hole, but that way, you know, when it comes to parts, you're not, you know, not everything is different. But I think the cap on my 250 to this one is the same. You know, again, in my 180 or my 880, you know, now that I'm looking at it, they're the same too. The only thing they probably could have did is just color coded them, but when it comes down to it, I guess anybody that's smart enough to run a chainsaw should be able to figure out where the oil goes versus the gasoline. But yeah, you can feel it a lot lighter. Yeah, and so then that's the first cut, making the hole in the rack for it. And
so that's Dad's first impression of that new saw. We'll look at the book here and get some of the specs and throw them up on the screen for you guys. But hopefully you guys get to see more of the saw in action over the next year or so, or the next lifetime. And
yeah, we'll give an update once we really get serious into it. One thing now is the snowpack is on now. It is no fun out there trying to dig something out of the snow. The last day I did bring some wood home. I think it snowed the next day. You know, it kind of bring a load in here and there, even though we probably got enough cut up. We had some piles stacked up out there, but if you can avoid going to get that in the snow. I mean, I remember telling you when you were younger, you got to get our wood in when it's nice out and dry.
Ahead of time.
It ain't frozen, and you don't even work half as hard at it. And then it's kind of like security, having it all stacked up there. So far as us going out and cutting stuff, I got some carvings I got to make. And so I'm going to do some of that right here in the yard. And that's a little bit different because I'm trying to make more of a nice smooth cut. Firewood, you're just pouring a coal stewer and just, you know, I'm holding back a lot of times sooner than, you know, so the saw isn't really working like it would when you're just cutting stuff up.
But yeah, just to sum it all up, that's his first impressions. Leave questions down below. Also leave comments for those of you that have ever used them saws, tips and tricks or your opinion on them, and then also what the competitor's doing. I'm sure some of you watching probably know a whole lot about saws too. So leave your comments down below. If you know anybody that might learn something or enjoy this video, share it. And yeah, like we were saying, hopefully you see a lot more of that saw and you'll get our impressions over time.
I got a feeling they're gonna, you know, STIHL's gonna have more models that have this ignition in the future. Maybe it's something where they want to see how it holds up before they just toss it into the whole line. You know, so they still make their other ones yet.
It'll be interesting to see how big that new model gets or how small it gets.
Yeah.
If it fills the whole lineup or if
They're not cheap, you know, so that's the other side of it. There's, maybe until they become real popular, then they're, you know, they want to make sure they can still sell them, which that's kind of a good thing when you're building stuff, you know, kind of keep the demand there. We never really set out to buy this. I went to the dealer for some other things, and I just noticed he had them. So I'll grab it while you can, I guess. Otherwise, I did make some phone calls looking for a 500 here a few months ago, and never heard back from those guys yet. So there's quite a waiting list.
That supply chain,
yeah,
everything.
It's all that.
But yeah, that's gonna be it for the video. Comment, share, like. We'll throw a bunch of specs up as we go along here, and hope you guys enjoyed. And check out our other videos.